Hello, witches. It's Kellen. I hope you're all doing well. Tonight, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind lately. It's a topic within traditional witchcraft. And yeah, so kind of the context around this is that here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are well into the winter tide. Where I live specifically, it is very cold. In this last few weeks, we've gone down into the negatives. It's actually been a pretty light winter in terms of snow. We haven't had a lot of big blizzardy snowstorms, knock on wood. Um, we were supposed to have one this weekend. They hyped it up like it was going to be really big and we were going to be trapped and snowed in. And I think it snowed like 5 inches, which I know in some places is a really big deal. Here it is not. Um, it was we were supposed to get what they were saying was that we were supposed to get a foot of snow, but that didn't happen. So whatever. But with it being the winter tide, I've been doing a lot of the introspective work that I think many of us feel pulled to do in the darker half of the year. Um, a lot of people might refer to this as shadow work, um, but basically, kind of turning inward, looking at parts of yourself that maybe um, need to be healed or processed or changed, let go of, all that good stuff. And I've been writing a kind of a series of articles on my blog about the stuff that I've been processing so far this winter. I mean, I guess I've only written two, but there's another one in the works. But anyways, with all of this being said, I want to talk about a specific type of spirit that traditional witches often work with, and this is the fetch spirit. So let's start by talking about the three selves. This is kind of a concept that you can find in many different traditions, even outside of witchcraft. But it's the idea that our soul or our spirit is broken up into three distinct parts. So there's our higher self. This is the part of us that is associated with our super consciousness, with our mental faculties. It's often associated with the element of air, and it's a part of us that resides in the upper world. Then there's our mid self. And by the way, there's many different names for these parts. These are just the terms that I use. Our mid self is us in this moment. It is our physical selves. It's associated with our ego, with the element of earth, obviously with the midworld, and then with our like physical nature. Then there is our lower self. This is the part of us that is associated with our unconscious, with our emotions, the element of water, and the underworld. And this is the fetch. This is in traditional witchcraft, when we talk about the fetch, we're talking about this lower self. Why it's important in that shadow work is because when we do that type of work, whether we realize it or not, we're tuning into this part of ourself, to this spirit. It's a spirit that is very primal. It's often described as being animalistic, and we'll circle back to that in just a little bit. But when we think of like our intuition, those like gut instincts, that is our fetch. And our fetch doesn't communicate to us verbally. I mean, I don't want to say like never has a fetch ever communicated to anybody verbally, because I don't know, it's a big world full of many possibilities. But in my experience and the experiences of people who have shared with me, that's not really the case. The fetch communicates to us via like symbols, feelings, dreams. So So it can be a part of us that's kind of hard to understand. Um, and but that communication is important nonetheless, because this is a part of us that often can often feel really hurt or scared. Um, but it's also a part of us that can be such a powerful ally in magic and in life in general. So it's a part of us that we really want to work. I mean, we want to work with our upper self and obviously with our mid self as well. And the idea is to find alignment with all three, right? Sometimes we talk about when those three align, it like ignites the witch fire. We are in sync, we're ready, we're in our power. Um, and it can be kind of hard to bridge the gap between those two. If we envision ourselves as a tree, right? Like we are the trunk that connects the branches of the higher self and the roots of the lower self. Um, so how do we? Oh, you know what? Before I go into that, sorry, this is what I want to circle back to, because the fetch is kind of a almost like a two-part spirit in the sense that part of our relationship with the fetch can be that shadow work, that tuning into the lower self to find healing and power. Um, but the fetch can also be projected out. And this usually happens when we have established a really close connection. Um, but when we think about the folklore of the witch, a lot of times witches, sorry, my Alexa just went off and I'm like, why did you, I didn't say your name. um, but there's a lot of stories of witches who have shapeshifted into animals, and those animals, and in that form the witch is able to go out and complete different tasks that maybe they wouldn't be able to in their physical form. And while the witch is out in that animal form, typically in these stories, they will somehow be injured, usually by a hunter who shoots the animal with a silver bullet, or a dog, a hunting dog that chases it. And then later, the witch is found with a matching wound. Um, and the idea is that they are somehow connected. Um, and for me, I see that as a reflection of the fetch because, as I said earlier, the fetch is very primal, it's very animalistic. So when it's sent forth, it often will take the shape of an animal. This is all stuff I talk about in my book, by the way. Shameless self plug. But so we can send the fetch out to do a task for us. And this is actually was first when I first encountered the concept of the fetch. And this was, I don't even know when this was. It's kind of a long time ago. But that's how I actually first encountered it, was not as like necessarily a part of our own spirit, but as kind of a manifestation that you send forth. And it's usually um, like it looks like a copy of you. Um, so I think that's kind of really interesting how that concept has, I guess, shown up in different ways. But why you'd want to work with your fetch again is because in doing so, you gain more access to unconscious parts of yourself, to parts of yourself um, that maybe need some emotional healing. So when we heal the fetch, we're healing ourselves. I have had a lot of really powerful experiences with my fetch, um, in which we worked together to heal an emotional wound. So emotional healing plus being able to send that fetch forth to complete a task. What kind of tasks? That's kind of up to your imagination, but it could be the same tasks you might send a familiar spirit out, to carry out a spell, to procure information, for whatever purposes you might have. So it's the possibilities are really endless, but I do think that that is a work that again comes after you've established a really good bond with your fetch, but also is work that should be done with careful consideration. I mean, we could look at those folklore stories also as kind of a cautionary tale. I mean, I don't think that if you send your fetch spirit out and something happens to it that you're gonna die. I think that, I mean, I don't know, who knows? But um, I just, if you're sending a part of yourself out there, you want to make sure that it's gonna come back. Um, and I do, again, shameless self plug, I do include a ritual for meeting your fetch, but also sending out your fetch in my book. So sorry. But okay, let's talk about how to connect with your fetch. Because I don't talk about that necessarily so much in my book outside of that ritual. Um, because your fetch isn't necessarily going to verbally communicate, you want to do all of the things that are kind of artsy and expressive. So you could connect to your fetch through art. Um, so maybe like sitting down in a meditative setting, really kind of tuning in, um, and then whatever your preferred art medium, because you could also do music too. Music. Um, if I was looking to do it through art, I might do music, or painting. I love painting. Um, those would be good ones. Dreaming, trying to encounter your fetch through dreams. So you could potentially do maybe a ritual before going to bed where you just set that attention and speak out loud, kind of ask other spirits you work with to help guide that experience. Um, but I think the most direct way is via hedge crossing. So when you cross the hedge, going down into that underworld and finding your fetch. I wish I had a more helpful way of facilitating that to provide you. But I think that that's one of those things that largely have to be experienced yourself in terms of like going down into the underworld and um, finding your fetch. Um, but I don't. Um, I will say though that in my experience, when I first started working with my fetch and I started to try to form that relationship, it was difficult. It That particular spirit wasn't the most trusting. It took a lot of reassurance, a lot of just being really calm. And I think that has a lot to do with the way we're kind of taught to handle and experience our emotions. So, like, for example, a lot of times people are brought up in a way where like emotional expression is like strongly discouraged. Um, as a therapist, I see this a lot in my clients, where it's like, I don't like to express my emotions. I view emotions as weakness. I don't even know how to identify my emotions. And I don't say that disparagingly, because it's really common. And that happens in people of all ages too. Um, So if that's the case, then you probably are gonna have to do a lot of work to connect with your fetch because because that connection has been so blocked, or maybe it's been damaged. And that was kind of the case for me, not necessarily in the sense that um, I I don't like expressing my emotions, but that I'm a really emotional person, and at times in the past, I haven't been the best at like self-soothing and managing those emotions in a way that's healthy. And then people have kind of used that against me in different kind of emotional abusive situations. And so I haven't always looked at my emotions very positively. I used to see them as something that was problematic, that people had to deal with me, that I was too sensitive and over emotional. And so I had to work at really repairing that relationship with my fetch when I first started. Um, but it can be done. In a way, I view the fetch as kind of a childlike spirit, where they can be kind of timid and shy. And honestly, they just kind of need a hug and to be told that it's going to be okay. At least that was my experience, which very much aligns with who I am and like what I need when I'm feeling emotional. Um, so think about think about what you need when you maybe like when you're having a bad day, or like if you're angry, if you're sad, like what helps you feel better, and then do that for your fetch. Um, and once you get that relationship established, I think it then opens up the space for doing that intense um, healing work, um, whatever that might be. Um, so, just as an example, a lot of times when I've had to do work, um, when I've worked really intensely with my fetches, when I've gone through bad breakups, and I'm feeling like deeply emotionally wounded, that's been a good time for me to just go to that place, commune with that spirit, and be like, how can we heal from that? Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say on that topic. Um, but if you are curious to know more, you can feel free to ask questions in the comments. If you feel like I missed something, or if you have experiences with a fetch spirit, and you feel so inclined to share, I would love to hear your experiences. Um, yeah. Otherwise, I hope you're all doing well. And until next time, take care.